Well, today I'm joined by Sadie Morgan. She's an architect. She's a partner in DRMM Architects. But one of the things she's done recently is started the Quality of Life Foundation. And I thought it'd be very useful to have a chat to her about how she sees things at this moment of crisis. Even the Queen said the other night that we should slow down, pause and reflect on our situation. And we are seeing a lot of changes happening, changes which are speeding up, like the use of digital technology as we're doing at the moment, but also cleaner air, emptier streets, all sorts of shoots about creating more livable cities, which maybe we should talk about and consider at the moment to see how, when we come out of this, whether we can create more livable cities. So, Sadie, perhaps you can start by telling me just a little bit more about what the Quality of Life Foundation is and what it plans to do.
Sure. So the Quality of Life Foundation really is an attempt to encourage the building industry to really think about what matters when we are delivering people's homes. So we have a huge effort to build more homes, and in doing so we just need to make sure that numbers don't override quality, and to really try to understand those things that matter to people. So what is it that what are the fundamentals that we need to include in our developments to really improve people's quality of lives? And if we can get that right, if we can actually encourage developers, local councils to really think about that, then I think that we might make sure that the focus is on people and homes, and delivering homes where people actually want to live and be in, than just churning out the numbers.
So top of your list of things that it's involved with is well-being, which I guess is pretty central to the crisis we're in at the moment. So looking forward, what can we learn from the COVID-19 that we might be able to incorporate in the longer term, do you think?
Well, it's like some amazing test bed, isn't it? I think that I feel as awful as it is, and how, and the tragedy that's come across, to many families, that actually that we need to look at the positives, and we need to find those things and those the way that we are operating differently, and take them forward. So, just the very fact that we are understanding how important community is, how we now shop locally rather than necessarily getting in our cars to go to big supermarkets, how fresher, how cleaner the air is, how important a sense of kind of identity is, how we all go and we want a sense of belonging, and that we clap and cheer the NHS on a Thursday night. And so there's a sort of this sense of belonging, this sense of sort of empathy with others, community, and resourceful-ness is something that I feel very passionately we need to capture and not let go when we come out of this sort of terrible lockdown, really.
So how do you think we actually do that? How do we keep people thinking about those things which are positive at such a terrible situation? Is this a job which you will be carrying out as a part of your Quality of Life program?
Absolutely. I think we need to constantly remind ourselves. I think that when we're in moments like this, the focus is extreme. It's very, very intense. And the feelings that we have now are ones that we need to try and capture those and embed them in society, and not lose that sort of sense of togetherness, not lose the sense that actually when we think about our environment, when we think about making those trips on a plane, when we think about whether or not we have to go to those meetings, or that we can remind ourselves that actually we managed a situation that was incredibly extreme. And although we don't necessarily want to live a life that's this extreme, we can take all of those learnings and make sure that they are somehow embedded as we move forward. So I think that I have real hope that actually that this has been such a disruptor, that we won't go back to a sort of normal, a normal way of life. I think we'll revert to something that's very similar, but I think that it will have shifted enough for us to understand what good looks like, to understand what neighborliness looks like, to understand what local community looks like, what thinking about your neighbors, thinking about others looks like, about managing without traveling, managing through, living a more virtual life. All of those things are now embedded in our psyche in a way that I think is going to be difficult to remove.
But there are interesting contrasts, aren't there? Because one would have thought, and certainly if you go back to the Abercrombie plan and so on, London's parks would be have a key purpose to play in a period like this, where people living in denser urban environments have green space they can use. But somehow we're not using it properly, and councils around London are closing down parks. That is rather ironic, is it not?
I cycle, as I know you do, and I've really enjoyed the kind of freedom that gives me. I also realise how lucky I am that I have a terrace, and that I can actually, go out of my apartment and breathe fresh air. And I know that others aren't that lucky, and how important parks and open space are. I personally, I disagree with the fact that Victoria Park, Brockwell Park have been closed. I think that they offer a lifeline to families who need that open space, who need to be able to go out and exercise as we're allowed to do. Of course, that doesn't mean sitting down and having picnics, but I think that if it's managed properly, it's totally possible to open parks in areas particularly of high density living, and also where there is a more of an agglomeration of council houses and those who are more likely to not have the kind of access to outdoor space that many of us enjoy. So I think it's a real tragedy that decision was taken.
But do you think then in the long term this might change our attitudes towards density, towards tall buildings, for instance, if people living in flats are finding it very difficult to really have a decent daily life as they're locked down? Do you think that will have a longer term impact on attitudes to urbanity, place making, and indeed the whole shape of our cities?
I think I would hope so, actually. I would hope that that we now understand how important space is, how important a kind of the ability to have some kind of privacy is, that space standards are there for a reason, and that we need to reflect on how our public realm is looked after, cared for and nurtured, and the importance of it. If we come out of this crisis sort of reminded of anything, I think it is that we need to have access, we need to be free to have, be able to move, we need to have access to nature. And I think all of that is totally possible to do within the city, and we are super lucky in this city to have beautiful big parks. And I can't believe that it isn't possible to live densely and also to enjoy outdoor space. And I think that if, we can, the very fact that the pollution levels are down allows us to sort of breathe freer in the city. All of these things are worth reflecting on when we come out of the crisis.
Now, one of the other issues that you look at in the Quality of Life Foundation is community engagement. Yes. And one of the things that has happened remarkably fast is that we've all become used to using this sort of means of communication, and the government is speeding up digitization of planning. Are technical methods like this a substitute, do you think, in terms of engaging with local communities about new development? Could you use this more to get to more people, or would it rather like other social media like Twitter and so on perhaps come back and bite us by making it too available to those who disrupt the conversation?
I think that, you know, it's always a mixture. One of the things that many of us are doing in this sort of period of lockdown is thinking very quickly how we can use this sort of boom of social media, and the fact that many people are now just online much more than they were before, just in order to feel connected. So I think that if one thinks about it carefully, then absolutely this is a really positive opportunity to engage with communities or with individuals that you wouldn't necessarily reach in other ways. How you manage that moving forward, I think, is is probably, you know, kind of just part of the process. But the very fact that we have time to reflect, we are interested in what's going on, we're worried and anxious, so, you know, probably many of us are looking at the news more than we have, or connecting back into friends and family, maybe making new friends, and sort of reaching out to this virtual neighborhood. I think it's absolutely something that we should capture.
And one of your other jobs is sitting on the National Infrastructure Commission. And one of the things that we've seen in recent weeks is a total shift in the way that the government spends money. Yeah. Do you think as we come out of this recession, the government will, or do you feel they should rather, go towards a sort of New Deal approach where we need infrastructure, we still need connections north and south. London needs new infrastructure as well for us to be able to move around efficiently. What will you be doing to promote better infrastructure and continued spending on infrastructure?
Ahead of this, the coronavirus coming to the UK, infrastructure was the one big thing that was being talked about. We expected a budget to be, you know, very focused on a larger investment in our infrastructure. I think that's absolutely the right thing, particularly as we come out of this crisis, and the economy will need a huge boost. So I think that investing in our infrastructure is absolutely the right thing to do. I wouldn't be surprised if we now think about our infrastructure differently, and there may be a kind of renewed focus on digital investment, on the need to make sure that the resilience of our, you know, the resilience of our economy has, you know, we've seen has been so very much based on a virtual connection, that I think that must be, you know, I would be surprised if that doesn't kind of play into thinking in the future. But the very fact that we are going to be in need of a significant boost in terms of investment economy, getting ourselves back on our feet, you know, big infrastructure spending, I think is one very positive way of helping us to achieve that.
It would be interesting to see whether the use of technology like this to communicate internationally will actually reduce the number of at least business flights, and whether there will be the same pressure after this to deliver things like the third runway at Heathrow.
One has to reflect on how many meetings one's done, not only across the country but internationally, and whether or not that they are absolutely necessary. I think all of us, when you began the interviews, talked about a kind of period of reflection, and I think we all need to think about how we did live our lives before this, and how we will be conducting our lives moving forward. And I think we have the ability, after such a huge disruption, to make change, and I'm very excited about that. I think that there is the opportunities for those of us who are trying, all of us who are trying hard to think about the climate, think about the environment, think about society, and the kind of levelling up agenda, all of those things that create a more cohesive and better world. We have ability to sort of shift the dial, and if we don't take that opportunity, I think it will be a huge waste of not only resource, time, energy, and many lives that have been lost.
Sadie Morgan, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Peter.